When Iris and Doug Jackson had their first child, a daughter, Rose, they were ecstatic. They'd been married just under 2 years and wanted a large family. The minute Doug met Iris, he fell in love. He was sitting in a sports bar with his friends while they spoke about baseball and children, when suddenly this vision in tight blue jeans, a white t-shirt tied into a knot just at her abdomen, her brown hair pulled back into a ponytail, and her hand gently pushing away her bangs from her big brown eyes, was standing next to him when he looked up from his menu. "Hey there, handsome. What can I get for you?" she asked him with a wink of her eye, which had specks of gold. Her nose was covered in freckles. I... His friend Jake took the time out of his story about how his 3-year-old son JJ was learning to read to ask Doug if JJ needed to help him with the menu. "Seriously, dude, I'll call Jenny. She can bring him on over here if you need her to." You need her to, Doug?" The guys all laughed, but Iris did not. She continued to look into his eyes. "Don't worry, Doug," she said, obviously picking up his name from Jake. "I'm here all night. I'll wait." And she put her hand on his shoulder. 6 months later, she and Doug were married. When retelling the story, Doug could never remember what he ended up ordering, but Iris did. Bacon burger, no lettuce, extra mayo, extra crispy bacon, no mustard, fries, no salt, and a craft beer, a new Belgian flat tire. Jake had been Doug's best man. He'd gone on to have another baby, a girl, and he'd been happily married until that night. That night about a year ago. His wife Jenny had been sick, and Jake had taken JJ with him to grab her some cough medicine. Then the two had gone out for ice cream, and on the way home JJ asked if they could drive by the cows. They lived about 15 miles away from a dairy, and JJ loved seeing those animals. Jake called Jenny and asked if she'd be okay for a little extra while if he did take JJ to see the cows, and she said that she'd be fine, so they went. The dairy was located off of a long dirt road. Jake had driven down it probably thousands of times, as his parents lived about 6 miles past the dairy on the other side. He'd grown up out here, and he knew the Hansons, who owned the dairy. They had no children of their own, and had taken a liking to Jake and his siblings. Now, they loved JJ like he was one of their own, and it was always a good time when JJ got to see the cows. The Hansons said that Jake and JJ had left just after sunset. That was the last time that anyone had ever heard from or laid eyes on Jake or JJ again. Jake's car had been found off in a field. One tire was blown, and the rim was bent up real bad. There was damage to the front and back of the car, and it was rumored that the back bumper had scratches on it and some paint marks, but the police never confirmed that. The back windshield had been broken, and the driver's side door was open. The steering wheel was covered in blood, probably from Jake's head hitting it, and the car seat was missing from the back seat. There was no sign that Jake had tried to walk out with the baby, although the police announced that he had, even though the bystanders and onlookers have reported that there were no footprints coming out from the field and no blood drops from Jake's obviously bloodied head. It was a mystery, and there were whispers that there had been similar incidences in surrounding towns and states too, but nothing was ever confirmed by the police. Before Rose was even born, Iris had purchased a baby on board sign to hang in the back window of their SUV. She'd always thought that having one was kind of weird and wondered if they really did make a difference in how people around you drove. In reality, if it did, then everyone should have one, she thought. But then, when her own mothering instincts took a hard grasp of her emotions, she knew that she needed one right away. If there was even one chance that other drivers would be more careful, then how could she not put one in her window? And how could Doug really argue with that? So, before Rose was placed into her parents' vehicle for the first time, before the drive home from the hospital, the placard was placed on the back window, swinging slightly from left to right as the happy family drove home. 6 months after Rose had been born, it was Doug's birthday. They went to Doug's parents' house, and Iris had arranged for all of their friends to surprise him. The moms sat off in groups talking about getting back to work, babysitters, toys, throw up. Doug's mom shared stories of how things were done when Doug was a baby. The guys gathered around the TV to watch the World Series playoff games, and around 8 p.m., after everyone had gone home, Iris asked Doug if he'd mind leaving too. She was so tired. Rose was teething, and the drive home was a rather long one that she'd really like to get out of the way. Doug's parents walked them out, hugged both Doug and Iris, and kissed the sleeping Rose on her forehead. As they were driving home, Iris put in her earbuds to listen to a book on Audible. She closed her eyes and relaxed her head against the headrest. Several minutes later, or possibly a bit more, as she'd fallen asleep, she felt her head rolling back and forth quickly. She opened her eyes, pulled out her earbuds, and asked what the hell was going on. She looked at Doug, but his eyes were looking at the rearview mirror. Both hands were on the wheel in a tight grip, and he was sitting up towards the wheel, his back stiff, his eyes wide. "Doug, what is it?" She noticed that his upper face, across his eyes and nose, was brightly lit. Headlights from behind them, she figured out, and she turned around to look back. Just then the lights came up towards them, closer and closer, and didn't stop. The vehicle hit the back of their car, throwing Iris's head forward, her seatbelt catching her body quickly with a jerking motion. "Hold on, baby, this jerk must be drunk or something." Doug pulled the car over towards the far right side of the road to allow the vehicle to pass. But it didn't. Doug sped up, and as he did, so did the vehicle behind them. Iris was trying to get a good look at what type of car it was, but she was blinded by the bright lights. Doug told her to get on her phone and call the police. Iris called 911 and told the operator that there was a vehicle behind them, chasing them and trying to knock them off the road. She explained that she couldn't see the make or model because the lights were too bright. And just then another light, like a spotlight, blasted into their car. It looked nearly daylight. The dispatcher, who was now on speakerphone, was telling her to calm down and to have Doug drive sensibly. "Bull!" yelled Doug as the vehicle began to pull up next to them. They had to have been going at least 90 miles an hour. The vehicle swerved into the back of Doug's SUV, causing it to fishtail. Iris put her hands on the dash and yelled, "Doug, the baby!" Doug was clearly panicking, and suddenly he slammed on the brakes, the car sliding on the dirt road. "What are you doing?" asked Iris as the vehicle flew by them. It was a blue van, 1970-something. The windows were all blacked out, and there were no license plates. Iris immediately relayed that information to the dispatcher, who told them to keep driving. The taillights of the van were disappearing from view. Iris was breathing heavily. She undid her seatbelt to check on Rose, who was still asleep, blissfully unaware of what had happened when Doug yelled out, "Oh, no!" Iris turned around. Doug was yelling to the dispatcher that the van was coming back. The operator told them that the car was just 4 minutes away, but the van was coming directly at them. Iris hadn't had time to refasten her seatbelt when Doug veered a sharp left to avoid the van. Their car hit the ditch and was rocketed into an empty field, where it landed on the front bumper, propelling the back over front twice before landing in a mound of dirt. Iris hit her head on the windshield, her chest crushed into the oncoming airbag, which jerked her neck back, and a quick snapping noise could be heard. Outside the SUV, 2 men, one wearing black cowboy boots with worn-out leather, and the other in brown steel-toe work boots, walked quickly up to the vehicle. One man checked Iris's neck for a pulse, and there wasn't any. The other grabbed Doug and heaved him up over his shoulder. The man with the work boots unbuckled the car seat and grabbed Rose. And as they were walking back to the van, the man with Rose put her on the dirt and quickly ran back to the car. Breaking the back windshield, he snatched the "baby on board" sign before getting back into the van and leaving just before the police arrived at the scene. "Damn it," sighed Captain Jones as he got on his radio. "I need 2 more cars out here on Hopkins Road. Looks like we've got another blue file case. Don't come back on the radio. Call my phone." Thank you for listening to my story. If you are not already subscribed, please take a moment to push that subscribe button. Also, give this video a thumbs up. And if you would like to be notified when I upload new content or when we go live on a podcast, please remember to click that bell. It's very important to get your notifications that way, because Facebook, algorithm, blah, blah, blah. Thank you.